Very good morning to all. First of all, I would like to thank ET and Times Group, distinguished guests, delegates, and then many entrepreneurs in the audience. I think this was a topic given to me, but I think I heard two talks from the beginning. In fact, wonderful talk by from Managing Director S Bank. Now the future is for we have only 30% on the land, but we have to depend 70% resources from the ocean. Most of the resources are unexplored, and this is where we need a lot of effort from the industry, especially to come into the picture for that. I think the topic given to me was basically on the resilient coast, sustainable oceans, what kind of solution that we can give on engineering for the future. This is my first standard slide which I used to present when we draft the policy for especially on the ocean. On the right hand side you can see the blue economy. When we look at the food, we have fisheries, many things come from the ocean. On other side we have ports and shipping, maritime transport. But we heard many things from the renewable energy. Right now the goal is towards to go for offshore wind energy. As you know very well, on the land we don't have much of a risk for that, but once we go to the ocean, the risks are very high. That is why government plays a very important role. How do we facilitate industry to come forward and work on the ocean for that? Now as on date, the entrepreneurs, what we have in the ocean are very few, but there is a huge scope, and I wanted to tell you that maybe in the next month we will have a consultative meet with many of the industry partners on the blue economy. This policy was launched in 2021 by Honorable Prime Minister. Ministry of Earth Sciences is the nodal ministry to coordinate with other ministry on the blue economy. Roughly 4% of the GDP comes from the blue economy, but the target from Government of India is to enhance to the double-digit number, maybe 11 to 12 in the coming future. That can come only through the support of the industry further. Why I put that other picture is, I think when we talk about the sustainability, the 2 points which are important for the sustainability is how do we optimize the resources. The two major threats are development in terms of population growth and infrastructure, what we have it on the both coastal cities and other areas. Second one is the climate change. How do we manage both the things for that? If you see this picture, I think most of you might have seen in Mumbai. Today, we are moderately in alarming stage. Whenever we get some kind of climate change effects, that is the right side picture is how Gateway of India will be there. But similarly, if you start seeing at many parts of the western parts of the coastal areas, this is the situation. Huge lands are getting flooded, and then we have a lot of population that are threat into the threat. But what government is doing, and then where private industry come take part on that. And if you see in the future, our number of cyclones are going to increase. You might have seen Calcutta 2 days back, heavy flooding. It is almost completely out. How do we prepare ourselves for the climate change? One is for the early warning system. Second one is also to develop and adapt to such kind of climate change for that. This picture is important for the many of the industry, what we need to do, and then how much of invest that we need to do for that. Whenever we get a hazard, immediately there will be damage. That's what I put it on the down. This is called as a less resilient coast for that. But when we recover back, if we invest something in the beginning, from the tipping point to above, then it will become more resilient. The bottom, what I have shown below the tipping point, is where we require investment in the beginning, but it is a very challenging task. Unless we have a scientific solution for that, it will be difficult to do. This is where the finance comes important for that. I think MD was talking about the blue finance or green finance, how we put up all these things into the system for that. And this is the typical graph. Whenever we design the cities, we ensure that there is no permanent loss to the system, and then we build the infrastructure in such a way, whenever we get the disaster, we recover back quickly to the system. Then coming to the sea erosion, which is happening along the most part of the coast, and land is getting lost. Almost, if you see this map, most of the coastal areas in India is getting eroded, and a huge amount of land is being lost to the system for that. These are some of the pictures. I think most of the things are available in ministry's website. How much of land has been lost, and then what is the magnitude of the climate change impact on the coastal areas for that. There are several solutions, but now for sustainability, what we are going to do for that is we need to have a nature-based solutions for that's where what we call it as a green finance or blue finance come into the picture. But fortunately, these kind of solutions need to be evolved in the beginning of the such kind of system occurs on that. Once we start doing it at a chronic problem, we cannot go for the nature-based solution. We need to have hard solutions only in place because it is almost like your disease is chronic. You need to have a immediate solution for that. This is the one area where we have put a little bit of hard solution, though I am not pretty comfortable about that. Whatever the picture which I have shown on the back about the flooding, to minimize the flooding, this was built in the coast of Kerala. It is quite expensive, I say 40 crores per running kilometer. But what we are looking at for this, minimizing this cost of the adaptability in the many of the coastal areas for that. Not only for this area, even if you see in Mumbai also we may have such kind of issues, and how do we put up our planning for that. Now the question is from the hard to the soft solution. Initially we start doing only hard solution, but now we are going for the nature-based solutions for the sustainability. Why do we need nature-based solution is we cannot build all the hard structures on the coastal area. Tomorrow for our next generation we have to show only the beaches in the picture only, not in the real state for that. So we have to worry more about our future generation for the sustainability. And this shows about there are not only on the innovation, but also we should have a good management practices. How do we take it forward for that? Most important one is the developmental activities that we are doing, and that most of them are unplanned and unregulated. We need to have a proper system for that and then get evolved for that. But what is really needed by the people? Fishermen wanted a such kind of system, but you go and put structures on the coast, where do you go and then park the fishing vessels for that? This is what we call it as a social inclusivity and aspiration from the fishermen for that. And we had, I think maybe who have seen the Pondicherry, there was no beach. Using innovation, we brought the beach back to the normal system. Suppose if you go to the Pondicherry, you can have a beautiful beach on the Pondi. But of course, it is almost half implemented, and it can be implemented in later in a better way for that. And this shows about the how do we make resilient city using some kind of innovation which comes into the picture for that. Coming to the coastal ecosystems, this is where mangroves and then many of the things are there on the ocean, what we call as the rainforest in the ocean. That is where green financing is important, and many attempts are already been made, but lot more to be done if you want to have a carbon sequestration or carbon neutralization for that. This shows some of our valuable ecosystems. How do we enhance using the what we call as a green finance and then make them more sustainable? It has multiple benefits. Not only it provides protection from the climate change, but also give you a lot of food, fisheries and all those things will be developed at these areas for that. Once we do that, we have a resilient coast using a nature-based solutions, and then it can also absorb the disasters which is coming to the picture for that. We had a framework for the management plan for the many of the coastal areas which considers many aspects on the ocean, but I just leave it to you, you can see it in the say. But what essentially it means is scientific based understanding, and also take ecosystem is important part for that. More importantly, society plays a very important role in the whole operations for that. We have developed several plans for that to enable some of the investment come in these coastal areas in a sustainable way. This is one of the major disasters what we have. I think somebody was talking about polluting some of our coastal areas and then waters for that. How do we mitigate and what kind of innovation that we require on the other side for that. This is one of the disaster of oil spill in Chennai. Entire oil from the CPCL has gone into the coastal area, and then many of them have a lot of trouble for that. We have to prepare ourselves for such kind of disasters in the future. And I'll just skip this because of the paucity of the time. To recover this disaster, almost it took 2 months' time of the entire coastal areas for that. That is what I was telling about how do we respond to the disaster and then come back to the natural system. These are all some of the valued evidences are available, and then how much of investment is required is also being worked out as a part of that. And this shows about some of the pollutant directly going into the sea, and then we will have a serious repercussions on that. And finally, what we need to have for the sustainability is a research, policy, and also good amount of investment we need to have. Today, if you see, almost we have a capacity of only 40% sewage is being treated. 60% is directly dumped into the sea to lack of treatment plants and other things for that. Of course, we need from the policy also all those things for that. Then ultimately, we aim at blue economy. In this, research and innovation plays a very important role, especially when we start harnessing or exploring the ocean resources in the deep sea for that. There is a policy, I think, which you have already mentioned about the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Policy also plays an important role, what we need to do at what part of the coastline for that. This shows the concept of marine spatial planning. When we harness the ocean resources in the deep sea, how do you harness the resources in a sustainable way? What kind of technologies that are required? All those things have been put into the policy of marine spatial planning for that. Ultimately, what we will get into the system with, this was done with 2 states, I think Lakshadweep and Pondicherry, but it will be extended for the other areas. Several stakeholder consultations were done, and finally these plans were made into that. And then you can see the number of stakeholders that are taking part in the whole part of the blue economy concept, what has been developed for that. And then ultimately we address both water activities, pressures and conflicts. And finally I'll conclude that once we wanted to have a blue economy, the basic instruments what we require is economic development. This is where innovation comes into the picture. Inclusivity, social and cultural consultation. Most important one is sustainability, ecology, conservation for that. This is the whole framework that has been arrived, and then hopefully we will get these numbers in next year, and then we'll involve more number of industry to take part in the blue economy for that. What ultimately we are going to achieve is stressed ecosystem to the biodiversity rich ecosystems, where we release the stress using what we call as a green finance and all those things. Thank you.